Hey everyone! Have you ever dreamed about creating your own little piece of paradise or a rugged mountain range? Well, that's exactly what we're doing today. I'm Josh, and in this video, we're diving into the amazing world of Unreal Engine 5's landscape tool. We'll be turning a blank slate into a stunning landscape that feels like it's straight out of a dream. Stick with me, and by the end of this video, you'll understand the fundamentals of shaping landscapes like a pro, bringing your own worlds to life. Welcome back to Ranger Realm Studios. Without any delay, let's get ready to sculpt some terrains. With your project open, let's find our tool. Navigate to the Modes dropdown and click on Landscape. This will open up the Landscape mode. Before sculpting, you'll choose the size and quality of your landscape. Ensure that Enable Edit Layers is selected, which allows us to work in layers instead of affecting everything at once. And don't worry about the material, as we will create that later in the video. The default values will be good enough for what we are going to create in this video. And if there are any changes you wish to make in the future, you can always come back to it. In your own projects, however, you will want to play around and find the ideal settings for you. Click Create, and voila, your canvas is ready. There are many useful brushes you can choose from when sculpting your terrain. You have the Sculpt brush, which adds elevation. Erase, which erases elevation. Smooth, which smooths out and blends the areas affected. Flatten, takes the highest point and flattens the area. Ramp, you can choose 2 points on the map and create a ramp that cuts into the terrain, which would be great for man-made features like roads or railroad tracks. Erosion, as the earth naturally moves, it can affect the landscape, and erosion replicates that. You have Hydro, which simulates the rainfall and water erosion, meaning that when water hits a certain spot really fast, or over a long period of time, it will alter the landscape. Look at the Grand Canyon, for example. And lastly, the Noise brush. This brush creates random high points, which add variation to your landscape. These are the main tools that we'll be working with today. There's a few other ones, but we won't be concerning ourselves with those today. Now for the fun part, sculpting. With the Sculpt tool selected, you can simply paint elevations onto your terrain. What I will be doing is changing the brush type, as this adds some variation to the terrain, as well as it adds some harder edges that I can then later smooth out, instead of having the smooth fall off that you get with the normal brush. Now let's make this blank canvas look a little more fun. Currently, the tool strength is set to 0.03. Now, if that takes too long for you to add the elevation that you desire, you can always increase or decrease the strength, which in turn will paint it much stronger onto your canvas. We'll be adding a reference file for major terrain features in the description if you want to check it out, so you can see what certain features look like in the real world, so you can replicate it and add some realism to your landscape. For those savvy with land navigation, can you name all of the major terrain features using Hidden Valley Ranch salad dressing? I like adding a complete border around my map so I know to block certain areas off for the player, otherwise you will just wander off the map and fall forever. And don't worry about our original play area, we will be moving that later in the video as well. Let's get in close to take a look at the map we just created and see if we're happy with it. Play from here. Take a look. Those look like some pretty tall mountains, some nice little hills, and a nice area for our player to go and explore. Still with a sharp fall off, so the player has difficulties climbing the mountain, which can actually make it a fun little challenge to find our way up. If anyone has played Oblivion or Skyrim, that was always a fun part, is trying to find a way to climb up the mountain without using the actual path that was provided. I like it. And suddenly our world comes to life and looks a little more like a real place. Now let's go ahead and smooth out some of our areas, because terrain is not always all jagged and rough-like. And that strength is way too high, so let's bring that strength back down. And smoothen out the terrain. This will also allow for the player to actually climb up sides of the hill a lot easier. I'll keep this mountain range though, because I like the way it turned out. Smooth it out just a little bit. And then we'll start coming to life once we add our textures to it. Actually, because we will be adding water in one of our future videos, let's add a little bit more elevation right here. And let's make this basically the home base of the player. So we'll choose the flatten, which again takes the highest point you have selected, and it matches everything that you draw over to that level. Anything that is higher will be lowered, anything that is lower will be raised. And then let's smooth this out just a little bit more around it so it looks more natural. And go back to erase, decrease the size of the brush a little bit. Erase some of this elevation over here because this is where I want to add a river. Maybe even a waterfall coming out of the mountain. And then because water is very strong, let's go ahead and increase the rain amount, tool strength, and we'll use our hydro brush and start chipping away over here on the side of the mountain, if this is where we want our waterfall to come from. And you can also just choose a random area where it tends to rain a lot. Let's increase the brush size so you can actually see it. And it will start eating away on the landscape wherever the water tends to hit a lot. And same with our noise, so we can see what that actually does. This flat little valley we have here just adds random variations how it raises and lowers some. This is the original floor that we had, and here we raised a little bit and we even lowered it some. So let's smooth that back out. That was a bit much. And then just to show you guys the ramp, what it can actually do, we'll go ahead and cut a pathway through this hill right here. So we're going to choose one point. We're going to choose another point, and then we simply position it where we want it to be. Click on Add Ramp, and then I don't know if you saw the change, but it did create a solid ramp for us. So if we want to, we can lower it some so you can actually see it cut away into the mountain. Add Ramp, and it altered it. Let's actually do a deep cut. Lower this as well and add ramp. And now you can see it created a nice deep cut into our mountain or into our hill. Drag it out some more so it takes it completely out. And now if we wanted to, as we humans tend to do, we basically paved ourselves a little road right through the hill. Now let's add some more elevation back here, just so it's a little prettier for the player to look at in the distance. All right, let's play again from here. Take a look. All right, the player's gonna be cut off from falling off the map. And there's plenty of map to explore for the player. Let's go over to our little river. You can already see how big this landscape was just with our default settings. So you can imagine how much bigger you can actually make it, or how much smaller you could make it if you really needed to. I like our little ramp. Alright, let's smooth out the sides just a tiny bit. Turn down the strength. So, too much, way too much. Alright, turn down the strength, turn down the brush size. And there we go, much better. And just like that, our peaks and valleys blend seamlessly and look real nice in our map. However, a terrain isn't complete without some textures and colors. Before we can paint our landscape, we will have to set up our landscape material. In order to set up our landscape material, we will have to add some materials. So go to the add to the project button and select Quixel Bridge. Allow access to the Quixel Bridge, and this will open up the Quixel Bridge window. From here, go to Surfaces and Ground. And here you can search for all different kinds of materials that you would want to use on your terrain. So make sure you sign in at the top right corner, sign in using your Epic Games account. Alright, once you're signed in, go ahead and find the textures you want to use. I already saved a few, so I will definitely be using the Nordic Forest Ground Moss course. I favorited it as well, so I can always come back and find it. You want to click on download, wait for it to download, and then export this material. You can also choose which kind of quality you would want it in, between low, medium, high, highest. But for now, we will keep it at medium because otherwise the files will be really large. Let's go ahead and export it, and then it will create a separate folder under Megascans, Surfaces, and then our texture. So let's add a few more to add some realism to our ground. A rocky forest floor, or the dirt. Let's go with the rocky forest floor. We'll download that as well. Add it, export it into the engine. And then let's look for a nice little rock material that we can use for our mountaintops. And if you don't want to scroll through and look through all the textures that they have, simply come up here, type in, and search for what you're looking for. And I think this one looks pretty well. A riverbed. Could use that for later on because we did add a little bit of a water area earlier. So go ahead and export that as well. Rocky forest floor. I like this one. This one looks good. So let's favorite it so we can always come back to it, download it, and then export it. All right, once we have all our materials, close out of the Quixel Bridge, open up your content browser, go into Megascans, and then in here, you can either make a separate folder to once again manage your workspace, but I will go ahead in here and create our landscape material. So right click into the content browser, go up to material and click on it. I'm gonna call it landscape underscore mat. All right, then go ahead and open it up. Go ahead and dock it to the engine if it's not already docked. Then control space to open up your content browser, go into surfaces, and then start adding your textures into the material. So this will then import a diffuse map or a color map, a normal map, as well as a mask that you can use to then only show certain highlights, or if there is a shiny material on this map, you can then change the roughness of it or the ambient occlusion of it. So go ahead and import all of the other textures as well. And try to organize them the way I'm organizing them. The reason why will make sense in a little bit. Once all of your textures are imported into the material graph, go ahead and select all of them. Come over to your material expression and texture sample and change the sampler source from texture asset to shared wrap. This allows us to use multiple textures in one. Now, let's go back to the top portion, right click and search for make material attributes. Then go ahead and bring the diffuse map or the color map, drag the RGB pin into the base color, drag the normal map into the normal. Then from the mask, grab the red channel, put it into ambient occlusion, and grab the green channel and bring it into roughness. Then move on over, because we got to use the coordinates of our textures as well. This will allow us to actually fine-tune the detail that we want to see in our map later. So we're going to create a texture coordinate for these textures. You can either right-click and search texture coordinate, or you can press U and left-click, which will also create the texture coordinate node for you. Then we're going to add a multiply node, which you can either again type in multiply or hold M on the keyboard and left-click into your canvas. Then drag from the texture coordinate into A, and then we're going to create a constant in order to feed into the B. Now either you can again right-click, type in constant, we're going to be using a constant, or as discussed in the last video when we create our materials, you can hit 1 on the keyboard and left-click, which will also create your single parameter constant or your single constant. We'll then right-click it and convert it to a parameter and call it tiling. Then drag that into the B portion. Let's clean this up a little bit. And then drag the texture coordinate into the UVs of your textures. Now, we're going to be using this texture coordinate for all of them, so you can go ahead and plug them into every single one. Now, we're going to have to duplicate the make materials attributes as well. You can simply hit Ctrl D on the keyboard. This will automatically duplicate it to wherever your mouse cursor is. And then once again, plug the RGB into the base color, the normal map into the normal, the red of the mask into ambient occlusion, and the green into roughness. Do that for the rest of your textures as well. Then you can go in and select each section, hit C on a keyboard, which will make a comment window around it. Then you can name each of these materials or each of these textures so you know exactly which one is which in case you want to change them or add some later on. Next, right-click into the canvas and search for Landscape Layer Blend. Select that node, and then come over to the Material Expression Landscape Layer Blend. Under Layers, Array Element, click the plus button for however many elements you have in here. In my case, there's 4. If you decide to go with more textures, go ahead and add more. If you only use less textures, then add less. And then from here, we'll simply drag the make material attributes into each of these nodes. And then if you want, with the landscape layer blend node selected, you can come back over here and rename the layer to the texture that you ended up using. And this will then rename your layers. Lastly, select the final material node, come back to the details panel under material and ensure that use material attributes is selected. This will change it so there's only a single input node, which will then use all of the material attributes that we just created from these materials. This will allow us to use multiple materials in a single one. And then simply connect these 2 pins, save, and that is all we need to do in our material editor. Let's close it out. Open up our content browser again, go back in here. Let's go ahead and create a material instance. Simply call it landscape instance. Go ahead and open it up, save it, dock it because we will be using it here shortly. Then, in order to apply the material, go back up, mode, drop down, go to selection, select landscape. Under landscape material, look for the landscape instance that we just created and select it. Then go back to landscape in our mode dropdown, go to paint, and then you see all these layers have been created. Then in here, you will need to create the layer info. So hit the plus button and then weight blended layer normal. And then hit save, and then that will create all of the layers. So we're going to do that for each one. Now we can go in, select the material we wish to use, ensure the paintbrush is selected, and we can paint our map. Go ahead and choose the riverbed. Let's go and do our river real quick. Decrease the brush size. And the reason Mossy didn't take over at first is because since we used it first, everything, the entire landscape changed to that material. As you realize, this doesn't really look like moss, a riverbed, or even if I start painting, choosing the rocky, and start painting my little mountaintops here, this does not look anything like the materials that we downloaded, right? So what we're gonna have to do is go back to our landscape instance, actually undock it and make it small so we can see what's happening. In the parameter that we created, enable the tiling and then start scaling up the tiling. And this will change how many instances are in one little square of our material. So, depending on what you're trying to create, how big you want your materials to show, or how often you want them to repeat, you can just increase the tiling, which will just make it look real nice in a small scale, but if you like zoom out, it looks very blocky. So we're gonna find a decent size that's relatively small, but still makes sense for us, right? Because if we play from here, look at how big that pine cone is. So we're gonna have to change that up just a little bit. All right. Let's take a look again. Still a little big, so let's change it to 0.07, or maybe 0.1. Let's see. Play from here. Still a big pine cone. All right, 0.15. It's starting to look a lot better. Let's go with 0.2. We do have some repeating of the textures, but that is okay because the more materials or the more textures we use, the more we can blend them together to make them look nice. So let's continue with, we can save this, close it out. This can be a long and tedious process, but it can also be kind of fun to see your landscape come to life. And it's always helpful to look at some reference images. If you're ever stuck, just go to Google Earth and look at certain terrain or mountain ranges or other areas that you'd be interested in creating and just practice. So once you have all that figured out, let's go ahead and smoothen it a little bit. Blending the textures together so there's not such a hard overlap between the two. And then if you're not happy with the terrain itself, you can always go back into your sculpting mode and then change it up again. And in the end, the more textures you end up using, the more detailed your world will look. Now, in order to make sure our base camp is back where it needs to be, go back into the selection mode, select the room, player start, all the items we placed that we haven't put in the folder yet, and then go ahead and drag them to where we want our map to actually start playing, our player to start playing. Now we can hit play. We moved our player start, we moved our base camp. We'll have our sword on the wall, our gemstones, our vases, and our beautiful terrain that we just created. And there it is, your introduction to the versatile landscape tool in Unreal Engine 5. With these basics, you can craft sprawling worlds of your dreams. Enjoyed this tutorial? Then hit that like button and share with others venturing into the Unreal. And remember, always hit the subscribe and bell icons for more videos from us. Keep pushing those creative boundaries, and until our next tutorial, happy world building and stay unreal.